Hi, I'm Daniel, I'm 29, and last Sunday I realized my family only loves me when I'm quiet. It was my sister Ava's 32nd birthday dinner. My mom had texted me that morning, please just be the bigger person tonight. No context. No explanation. Just that. Like I was walking into a courtroom instead of a restaurant. I already knew what it meant. Ava has this way of turning every family gathering into a performance where she's the misunderstood heroine and I'm the supporting character who forgot his lines. It's been like that since we were kids. If she snapped at me, I was too sensitive. If I defended myself, I was starting drama. Somehow I was always the problem. The restaurant was one of those trendy Italian places with hanging lights and exposed brick. I showed up 10 minutes early, stupidly hopeful. I'd even bought Ava a decent gift, a leather travel bag she'd mentioned once. I thought maybe if I showed up generous, calm, easy, it would reset things. When I walked in, everyone was already seated. Mom waved at me like I was late. Dad didn't look up from the menu. Ava was mid-story, laughing loudly. There was an empty chair at the very end of the table. Mine. Daniel. Ava sang when she saw me. You made it. I wasn't sure. I smiled. Happy birthday. She air-kissed my cheek and whispered, let's not do anything weird tonight, okay? Anything weird. Translation, don't react when I poke at you. Dinner started fine. Small talk. Work updates. Dad complaining about traffic. I stayed neutral, nodded, asked questions. I could practically hear my mom's earlier text hovering over my head like a warning label. Then Ava opened her third glass of wine. She started telling the story about my failed engagement. The one from 2 years ago. The one that took me months to crawl out of. She told it like it was a sitcom episode. And then Daniel calls me at 2 a.m., crying, she laughed, looking around the table. Like I'm his emergency therapist. My chest tightened. I hadn't called her crying. I'd called her because I found out my fiancé had been cheating and I didn't know who else to call. I forced a smile. That's not exactly how it happened. Ava rolled her eyes. See? This is what I mean. You always rewrite history. Mom jumped in immediately. Daniel, honey. Not tonight. Not tonight. Like my humiliation had a schedule. I felt the familiar heat rise up my neck. Every instinct in me wanted to defend myself. To say, no, that's not fair. To remind them that I was the one who drove Ava to job interviews when she got laid off. That I co-signed her first apartment lease. That I showed up. Every time. Instead, I heard my mom's voice again in my head. Be the bigger person. So I swallowed it. I laughed weakly and said, yeah, guess I was dramatic. The table relaxed. The tension dissolved. Ava smirked slightly, victorious. Conversation moved on. But something inside me didn't. For the rest of dinner, she kept making little comments. About how I can't keep a relationship. About how I'm intense. Each one small enough to pass as a joke. Each one landing like a thumb pressing into a bruise. And every time I opened my mouth, my mom's eyes met mine in warning. Be the bigger person. By the time the cake arrived, I realized something that made my hands start to shake under the table. Being the bigger person in my family didn't mean being mature. It meant being silent. The cake had sparklers in it. Ava stood up while everyone sang, soaking in the attention like sunlight. I clapped with the rest of them, smiling on autopilot, my jaw starting to ache from holding it there. When the candles were blown out and the plates were passed around, Dad tapped his fork against his glass. Little speech, he said, grinning at Ava. Birthday girl deserves it. Of course she did. Ava stood, wine glass in hand, swaying just slightly. Okay. I'll keep it short. She cleared her throat dramatically. I just want to say I'm so grateful for my family. Even when they're complicated. A few polite chuckles. I felt it coming before she even looked at me. And especially Daniel, she added, tilting her head. For teaching me what not to do in relationships. The table erupted in laughter. I didn't. My ears rang. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. It would have been so easy to fire back. I had material. Years of it. Her revolving door boyfriends. The time she crashed Mom's car and blamed it on a mechanical issue. The credit card debt I quietly helped her pay off. But I just sat there. Mom's hand squeezed my knee under the table. A warning disguised as affection. Daniel knows we're joking, she said quickly. Right? Every face turned toward me. I felt like I was 12 again, standing in the kitchen after Ava had broken a vase and somehow convinced everyone I'd knocked it over. Waiting to see if I'd accept the punishment quietly. I cleared my throat. Yeah. It's funny. Ava beamed. See? He's learning. Learning. Something in my chest cracked open then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, internal shift. I looked around the table. At my dad scrolling through his phone again. At my aunt cutting her cake, pretending not to notice the tension. At my mom watching me with that anxious expression she gets when she thinks I might cause a scene. No one looked concerned about me. They were concerned about peace. There's a difference. The conversation drifted to vacations, work gossip, anything but the fact that I'd just been publicly dissected for entertainment. I pushed cake around my plate and tried to breathe normally. Ava leaned toward me. Don't be moody, she murmured under the noise. It's my birthday. Moody. I nodded slowly. Right. She smiled, satisfied, and turned back to the group. That was the moment I realized something uncomfortable. If I defended myself, I'd be the villain. If I stayed quiet, I'd be the punchline. Those were my only roles. And I was exhausted. When the waiter came to refill water, Ava waved him off dramatically. Oh, and Daniel's actually covering dinner tonight, she announced casually. As my birthday gift. I blinked. What? She laughed like I'd missed a cue. Relax. You make more than all of us. Consider it your contribution. I hadn't agreed to that. Not even close. Dad chuckled. That's generous of you, son. My mom didn't even look surprised. She just gave me that same tight smile. The one that says, please don't make this hard. The bill hadn't even arrived yet, and somehow the decision was already made. I felt something cold settle over me. Not anger. Not even embarrassment. Clarity. They expected me to absorb it. The jokes. The cost. The disrespect. Because I always had. I stared at the tablecloth, tracing the pattern with my finger, and for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. What if I just didn't? The waiter approached with the leather folder in his hand. And every eye turned to me again. The leather folder landed in front of me like a verdict. I didn't reach for it. For a few seconds, no one said anything. The kind of silence that isn't quiet at all, it hums. Ava raised her eyebrows at me like I was missing a punchline. Well, she said lightly. Don't faint on us. I looked down at the folder, then back up at her. I never agreed to pay for everyone. The air shifted instantly. Ava laughed too loudly. Oh my God, Daniel. It's a joke. The waiter doesn't think it's a joke, I said. Dad sighed. That disappointed, tired exhale I've heard my whole life. Son, it's her birthday. I know whose birthday it is. Mom leaned closer to me, voice low and urgent. Daniel. Please. Be the bigger person. There it was again. For a second, I almost did it. I almost opened the folder, handed over my card, swallowed the resentment like I always do. It would have been easier. 10 seconds of discomfort, and then we'd all go home pretending we're fine. But something inside me refused to move. Why is being the bigger person always my job? I asked quietly. No one answered. Ava's smile thinned. Because you're the only one who makes everything dramatic. I stared at her. You just told a table full of people that I called you crying like I'm some unstable mess. You just volunteered me to pay for dinner. But I'm dramatic. She rolled her eyes. See? This. You can't take a joke. It wasn't a joke. Daniel, Mom snapped softly, panic creeping in, not tonight. That phrase hit differently this time. Not tonight. Not at my wedding. Not at Christmas. Not when she's stressed. Not when Dad's tired. Not when it's inconvenient. There was never a night that belonged to me. I felt weirdly calm. Like I'd stepped outside of myself and was watching the scene from across the room. You know what? I said. You're right. It's not tonight. Ava smirked, thinking she'd won. I'm not doing this tonight, I finished. I stood up. The chair legs scraped against the floor louder than I expected. A couple at the next table glanced over. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Sit down, Dad said, his voice hard now. Embarrassed. Daniel, don't, Mom whispered, reaching for my sleeve. I gently pulled my arm away. I brought a gift. It's in the car. You can have it. But I'm not paying for dinner. And I'm not sitting here while you all laugh at me. Ava scoffed. You're unbelievable. No, I said, meeting her eyes. I'm done. The word hung there. Done. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just, final. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. My pulse was in my ears, but underneath it was something else. Relief. Sharp and terrifying. As I walked toward the door, Mom called after me, her voice breaking. You're overreacting. I paused with my hand on the handle and turned back one last time. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just don't want to be your punching bag anymore. And then I walked out. The cold night air hit my face like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the reflection of the restaurant windows. I could see them inside, clustered together, already talking. Probably about me. My phone buzzed before I even reached my car. Ava. I let it ring. Then Mom. Then Dad. 3 missed calls in under a minute. Another buzz. A text from Ava. You just ruined my birthday. Are you happy now? I looked at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. I got in my car, set the gift bag in the passenger seat, and drove away without replying. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour, windows down, cold air cutting through the fog in my head. My phone kept lighting up in the cup holder. Calls. Texts. A family group chat notification exploding with messages I didn't open. At a red light, I finally picked it up. Mom, please come back. We can fix this. Dad, you embarrassed all of us. Ava, you're so selfish it's unreal. Selfish. That word used to gut me. I used to bend myself into impossible shapes trying to prove I wasn't. The reliable son. The calm brother. The one who smooths everything over. But sitting there at that red light, I realized something uncomfortable. If I was so selfish, why was I the only one constantly sacrificing? The light turned green. I kept driving. By the time I got home, it was past 10. My apartment was quiet, dim. I set the leather travel bag on the kitchen counter and just stared at it. I'd spent an hour picking it out. Imagined her using it on some trip, maybe even texting me a thank you. Now it looked stupid. Naive. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from Mom. I hesitated, then played it. Her voice was tight, strained. Daniel, I don't understand why you couldn't just let tonight be about your sister. You know how she gets. You know she doesn't mean anything by it. Now everyone's upset. Please call me. You know how she gets. That was the family motto. Translation, accommodate her. I sank onto the couch and let the silence fill the room. No one had left me a message asking if I was okay. Not one. Around midnight, there was a knock at my door. My stomach dropped. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Mom was standing there. Coat thrown over her shoulders, hair messy like she'd left in a rush. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around like she hadn't been here before, even though she had. Her eyes landed on the gift bag on the counter. "You didn't even give it to her," she said quietly. "I didn't get the chance." She turned to face me. "Daniel, this is getting out of hand." I let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Out of hand?" "I left dinner. You stormed out. I walked out. You made a scene." I stared at her. Did I? Or did I just stop absorbing one? She rubbed her temples. "Why can't you just ignore her comments? That's what everyone else does." "Because they're not about everyone else." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I'm tired, Mom," I said, softer now. "I'm tired of being the one who has to understand. The one who has to be patient. The one who has to pay. The one who has to laugh it off. She's your sister. And I'm your son." The words landed between us like something fragile. Her eyes flickered, and for a second I thought I saw guilt there. But it was quickly replaced by frustration. "You're older," she said. "You should know better." That did it. There it was. The hierarchy. The expectation. The quiet rule that my feelings were secondary because I was supposedly stronger. "I do know better," I replied. "That's why I left." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. "You're choosing this," she said finally. "You're choosing distance over family." "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself over disrespect." The room felt smaller suddenly. Charged. She grabbed her purse from the table. "If you walk down this path, Daniel, don't expect things to be the same." I nodded slowly. "They already aren't." She hesitated at the door, like she wanted to say something else. Maybe apologize. Maybe ask me to reconsider. Instead she just said, "Call your sister tomorrow." Then she left. I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it. For the first time, there was no script. No instruction to be bigger. No one watching to see if I'd fold. Just me. And the quiet realization that I might actually lose my family over this. And I still wasn't sure if that scared me, or freed me. I didn't call Ava the next day. Or the day after that. The family group chat went silent for a while, which somehow felt louder than the arguing. No memes from Dad. No passive-aggressive, "good morning," texts from Mom. Just nothing. On Wednesday afternoon, my Aunt Carol called. She never calls me directly. "I just wanted to check in," she said carefully. "Your mother's very upset." I figured. "She says you've cut everyone off." I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the spreadsheet open on my screen. "I left a dinner." Well, it was more than that. Of course it was. In my family, boundaries were betrayals. "Ava's been crying," she added. I closed my eyes for a second. There it was. The guilt hook. "She said you humiliated her." I almost laughed. "She humiliated me." Carol sighed. "You know how she is." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I do." There was a pause. Then, softer, "She's always been fragile." Fragile. That word used to excuse everything. I felt something shift again, not anger this time, but clarity sharpening into something solid. "I've been fragile too," I said. No one just called it that. Carol didn't have a response. We hung up politely, the way families do when nothing is actually resolved. That night, my phone buzzed again. "Ava." Not a call. A long text. "I can't believe you made my birthday about you. You've always resented me. Ever since we were kids. Mom says you've been distant for years. If you had a problem, you should have said something instead of exploding." I read it 3 times. Exploding. Like walking out of a restaurant was an act of war. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard for a long time. I could feel the old instinct creeping in, "Explain yourself. Smooth it over. Take half the blame so everyone can breathe again. Instead, I typed slowly. I didn't explode. I set a boundary. The typing bubble appeared almost instantly. By abandoning your family? I didn't abandon anyone. I refused to be disrespected. A few seconds passed. Wow, she replied. You really think you're some kind of victim? That word hit differently than selfish had. Victim. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and suddenly I wasn't 39 missed calls deep into a fight. I was 9 years old, standing in the living room while Ava cried because I wouldn't give her the remote. Mom telling me to just let her have it. Dad saying, it's easier this way. It's easier this way. I realized something that made my stomach drop. They didn't want fairness. They wanted ease. And I was the easiest one to sacrifice. My phone buzzed again. If you don't apologize, Ava wrote, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. There it was. An ultimatum. A line drawn in cranberry sauce and tradition. I stared at that message for a long time. Thanksgiving at my parents' house has always been loud and chaotic. Football on the TV. Mom's overcooked turkey. Ava making sarcastic commentary from the kitchen. It's muscle memory. And now it was conditional. I felt the pressure building in my chest, not panic, but grief. The realization that choosing myself might actually cost me something real. I typed back one sentence. Then I guess I won't be there. I hit send before I could second guess it. The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It was heavy. And for the first time, I understood that this wasn't about one dinner. It was about a lifetime of being told to shrink. And I was finally refusing. But refusal has consequences. And I hadn't felt them yet. Not fully. Thanksgiving came anyway. No dramatic final showdown. No last-minute apology tour. Just a date on the calendar that I didn't drive to. I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach. For a split second, muscle memory kicked in. I almost reached for my keys out of habit. Almost texted Mom something neutral like, on my way. Instead, I made coffee. The silence in my apartment felt different than it had weeks before. Not lonely. Just honest. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A picture in the family group chat. The dining table set. Everyone smiling too hard. Ava in the center, of course. The caption from Mom, family is everything. I stared at it for a long time. A year ago, that photo would have destroyed me. I would have folded immediately. Apologized for misunderstandings. Paid for something. Smoothed it over. But all I felt was a strange mix of sadness and relief. I muted the chat. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it expecting a delivery. It was Dad. He looked older somehow. Tired. Can I come in? He asked. I nodded. He stood awkwardly in my living room, hands in his jacket pockets. No speeches. No anger. Your mom's having a hard time, he said finally. I know. He looked around like he was searching for something to fix. Ava says you've changed. I have. He studied me for a long moment. You used to just let things go. I met his eyes. Yeah. I did. There was a long silence between us. Not hostile. Just unfamiliar. You really not coming today? He asked. No. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer but still needed to hear it. I don't think you're wrong, he said quietly. That caught me off guard. What? He exhaled. Your sister can be, a lot. And maybe we've leaned on you too much to balance that out. The words weren't dramatic. No sweeping apology. But they were real. I didn't leave because I hate her, I said. I left because I was starting to hate myself. He absorbed that. I don't want to lose you over this, he said. You won't, I replied. But I'm not going back to how it was. Another pause. Fair enough, he said. He didn't ask me to apologize. Didn't tell me to be the bigger person. When he left, he squeezed my shoulder. Not as a warning. Just, as my dad. That night, I made my own dinner. Nothing special. Burned the edges a little. Watched a game by myself. And somewhere between the first and second quarter, I realized something. I didn't feel small. I felt steady. Ava and I haven't magically repaired everything. We talk less. When we do, it's careful. Controlled. Maybe that'll change. Maybe it won't. But the rules have. If she makes a joke at my expense now, I don't laugh. If someone volunteers me for something, I say no. The world doesn't end. Turns out, being the bigger person doesn't mean shrinking. Sometimes it means standing up, and being willing to sit alone at your own table if that's what it costs. And honestly, I can live with that.